Hey, and welcome to Vicky Midwood here. I am your host on Raw Chatter, and today I am talking about bereavement and self-soothing with food or alcohol. And grief obviously comes under the heading of bereavement. Now, I am talking about death and dying, folks. So obviously, this may trigger some people, but we need to talk about it. I actually did a podcast not that long ago. I think on season two. It's not a TV series, Vic. On season two, with a wonderful lady who is involved in death cafes, and it's a subject that we need to, I believe, discuss more, and particularly how we manage bereavement, the loss of a loved one. That's what that term means. Now, we all are going to deal with losing somebody or something. It could be a pet, or it could be, and this is the angle that I'm coming from to some degree, a habit that we have become very attached to, that we believe we need to keep on going. In other words, an addiction. Because letting go of an addiction and changing our complete identity can often feel like a bereavement or a loss. And we can almost go through the grieving process. And I have shared this on my blog. The most recent blog that I did, which went out at the weekend on my website, www.vickymidwood.com, and I've also put it on Medium as well. So if you are a Medium follower, you can check it out there. It's titled Bereavement, Boozing and Self-Soothing, because they often do go together. Now, I'm not going to regurgitate the blog because I want you to go and read it. The point of doing a podcast is for just to share something a little bit different for you. But I want to share with you that if you are in the process now of dealing with a recent bereavement and you have noticed that you've got physical issues and symptoms going on, and you're starting to worry about your own health on top of everything else, I want you to know that that's actually perfectly normal and part often for a lot of people of the whole bereavement process. There are physical issues that we often feel, like complete lethargy, lack of motivation, just feeling like you're coming down with something, or maybe you actually do pick up a cold or a virus, and because your immune system can be compromised, and knowing that these symptoms are unfortunately often a part of the grieving and the bereavement process, I think is important, because otherwise it feels like just something else for you to handle. Now, when it comes to grieving and what that actually means and what it looks like, I'm sure you've heard this from many people and read it on many posts and blogs. Is that it's different for everybody, and it absolutely is. But there is a whole host of emotions that we go through, and when you Google it, which I'm sure you maybe have done, especially if it's a new process to you, often it talks about the 5 stages of, or the 7 stages of, and they kind of list these things, don't they, that you're going to go through. And there's this belief system that I had originally, and I know that when I've spoken to other people about this, they have it as well, that you're going to have these symptoms in order, and they don't appear in order. That is not how it works. So there can be disbelief, there can be shock, there can be anger, there can be fear, there can be upset and sadness and resentment, and there can be so many different emotions, but they don't come in order. Right? They can hit you from all sorts of cues and just phrases that people say, or songs, or whatever. And this is where you need to allow yourself some compassion. Now, for me, I didn't actually understand what grief was, and or how to do it. What did it really mean? I understood I had lost a pet. I had, and that's a word, again, a term that, I don't like it. As you heard in what I shared last week when I was talking about the book launch, I did say that I was going to be talking today about grieving and bereavement and boozing and addiction, and picking up food and alcohol to help us to manage our feelings and cope with it. But what that word lost, I always think it's a wrong kind of word, because it almost, I feel It's almost like we're talking about a bunch of keys or a wallet. You have lost somebody. They're not lost. We haven't lost a person or a pet, right? They're just no longer in their physical form. This is my belief on this planet. Um, but everything that we shared and every part of the memories and the experiences that we had when they were physically here on this planet we call Earth, right, is something that you have got in your memory banks. We've got photos, you have got the memories of so many times that were fun and joyous, that they drove you insane, that they, the good and the bad. We've got the lot. So, what have we lost? Well, I don't like that term and I'm not going to use it. So, when somebody leaves their physical body, that's the terminology I like to use. I didn't really know how to respond or how to react. And the reason for that, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but the reason for that is because I recognized that I'd not had anybody really kind of explain or help me to know how to do it. So I found a dead cat. That's my first experience that I had of an animal dying. Was I found it dead, actually lying on the top of a boiler underneath the shop that we used to have, and I thought it was asleep, right? And it wasn't. I recognised that it was dead, and it was overwhelmingly a feeling of sadness that it was no longer alive, and I wasn't going to see it running around anymore. But it wasn't particularly an in-house pet, and it wasn't a cat that used to come in and sit on your lap or sit by the fire and we could cuddle. So there wasn't that closeness. We had gerbils, and they died. And I can remember that was an overwhelming sense of sadness, but also that we could get another one. And again, they're not like humans. They don't converse with you. So it's a different thing. Now, fast forward to a number of years later when I have had pets die, cats have died of illness. One got run over by a truck, and it was when we were when I was little, living in the same shop. And I can remember the anger at the brand of biscuit that was on the truck that ran my cat down. It was McVitie's. And I vowed, because of my anger and my shock and my disbelief, that I would never, ever, 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 and I was a young kid, maybe about 6 or 7 at the time, never, ever, ever eat another McVitie's biscuit as long as I lived. And maybe unconsciously, that's my programming of why I don't do biscuits and I don't like biscuits. Maybe that is how powerful that was. I don't know. The truth is, I've never been a biscuit fan, I don't think, to be honest, even before that. But it kind of would make sense if that made me even more adamant and reinforced this idea that I do not do those things. I share in my blog that phrase, I do not. And it's important that the language that we use is something that we are absolutely aware of. And I will talk about it in nearly every episode, because I cannot emphasize enough the importance of the words that we choose to use. And oftentimes people don't choose them, they come out automatically. And I'm inviting you to start being really aware of the words that you are allowing to come out of your mouth. Right. And oftentimes we're not aware because it's so unconscious. It's something that is so automatic, you're not even aware of it. But if I can just kind of poke you into starting to be aware, then it's going to be beneficial for you and crucially for the people who are hearing those words, who are receiving them. But as usual, I've digressed. So for me, I got the anger side of things. And then I was angry more than anything. And I was cross that should happen, and the truck driver didn't even stop, and he wasn't even aware, I don't think. It was one of the people afterwards who told me that that's what had happened. Thankfully I didn't see it, so I only know from being told sort of secondhand. But then I've had cats who have died, and it's been absolutely heart-wrenchingly, devastatingly emotional, because I had to make the decision to take them to the vet and end their life because I couldn't bear to see them suffer anymore. Now, there's a part of me wishes that we could do that with humans. When I saw my mum suffer as she did, and when she said to me she didn't want to be here anymore because she didn't have a life, if I could have done something legally, then I'm absolutely certain I would have gone down like a lead balloon, no doubt, with other members of my family. But I got where she was coming from, and as somebody living with bipolar, she wasn't living. And the bipolar story is a whole other thing. But people may know my thoughts and views on how my mum was treated, and it was abysmal. It was appalling. And I still think that in today's supposedly modern world, they still are not treating people much better, to be quite honest. There is a lot we don't understand about bipolar, but there's a lot that we do. But the methods and the help being offered is just so far behind. I'm not going to get on that particular subject. Suffice to say that it was heart-wrenching to have to make that decision and to walk away from the vets and know that that was it. And so you see the space where they used to sit, and you think about the things that they used to do and their little quirks and foibles and what have you. Well, it's not different for human beings. I know pets can't talk to you, but you still have memories and you still have thoughts. So when somebody is judging or telling you how to grieve or what you should be feeling or whether you should be over it by now, I want you to just kind of let it wash over you if possible, because it is your personal process. One thing that is important, though, is to not let it completely take over your life. And when my mum died, it was a relief. We didn't know exactly when, but we knew that she was ill. But having said that, we had been in a scenario many years before where we'd all been called into a room in the hospital as a family and been told to prepare ourselves for the fact she was in a coma, that she would probably not come out of it. Well, she was a hell of a strong lady physically, and she did. Much to the surprise of the doctors, she did come out of it, and she lived for quite a long time afterwards as well. Potentially, I think she wished she probably hadn't, but we knew that she had had multiple chest infections and she was in a lot of discomfort, and it was horrible to see. For anybody who's gone through watching somebody deteriorate from physical illness, whether it's MS or whether it's cancer or any issue or illness where you can see that they are getting frailer and able to understand less, and you just know that they're in pain most of the time. It's horrible to stand by and watch. It really, really is. And so we knew it was going to happen. And was it a kind of a relief and a release when it did? Yes, but I didn't know how to respond and react. And again, if you listen to last week's episode, you'll hear me share about me having to do the Excel exhibition for my book launch, with the book that I didn't actually have to launch. And so my focus was on that, and how cross and angry I was with the whole situation with the publishers, that I didn't really process. Her funeral was on the 13th and the exhibition, I think, was on the 15th. It was just literally days after, and it was a 2-day event. And so my focus was kind of elsewhere when I think about it. And so when I went to an event with my health coach to Colombia, we went to Colombia and we did plant medicine. And you'll have heard me share a number of times, I'm always open to new things, and you never know until you have a go. And I wanted to try ayahuasca, but I wanted to try it in a space and a place that was sensible and safe. And I had a heart attack, as I said to you, not long after that whole book mum dying scenario. So my mum died in January. The funeral was on the 13th of February. I had the exhibition thing, I think, on the 15th and 16th of February. And I had my heart attack in the very first week of March. So not long after at all. And so I wanted to go on this trip with my health coach that year, 2018, because he was taking a group of people, but quite rightly so. He said, and it was going to be in the August or September time, he said, it's a little bit too soon after you having a heart attack. I'm not happy and I don't think it's a very good idea. But he was going to check in with a shaman. And she said, quite rightly so, tell her to come the following year. So in 2019, on the year of my 50th birthday and my daughter's 21st, I had a year of doing a lot of trips. And to be quite honest, what that kicked off, having a heart attack in 2018 kicked off for me, was the realization that you just never know how long you've got. Now, for women, we don't get the symptoms that men do at all. And this is not about hearts and heart attacks, by the way. It is about grieving and stuff. But I recognized that I needed to take the opportunities that I could get as and when they came up, because I genuinely really didn't know how long I had. Oftentimes, the first time a woman knows she's had a heart attack is when she's had one and she's dead. Right? We don't get the warning signs. I didn't. I fainted. I thought I was coming down with a sore throat and a bit of a virus, right? And that's often pretty much all the signs we get. So you can see how it's very often missed by GPs and anybody else that you might go to with symptoms. So for me, I was really, really fortunate that I had a heart attack. I had a stent fitted. The ambulance were brilliant. They took me to the best hospital in those circumstances. But I ended up going on this trip. And what I recognized while I was out there, and it was the shaman and my health coach that helped me to recognize it, that I hadn't grieved at all for my dad, who committed suicide, because I kind of knew he was going to do it. At least in my head I did. And I hadn't really grieved for my mum. And the recognition of that was I didn't know how. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know what to feel. And so I didn't really think about it. My thought process literally, well, they're no longer here in their skin and bone physical form, but I don't believe that, they're lost. Certainly, they're not lost. And so I didn't really know what I thought and what I felt. Now I understand a little bit more about energy and the universe. Then, I feel differently again, but I recognized that there was a big part of me that was upset about the fact that they did have their separate lives, but it was the two of them together that created me and my brother, and that they were so separate and they had such a horrendous parting, and never really spoke together much after that. But I also knew that both of them cared very much about me, and there were so many things that I had some great memories and some powerful stuff, and I can still hear both of their voices separately often. When I'm kind of going, what should I do here? Then I feel as if it's coming through. And some people experience that and they absolutely know that it is their mum or the dad, and other people are not sure. It's a thought. It comes in as a thought, and if it is them, then that's great. And if I choose to believe it is, then that's also great. It may or may not be. It doesn't actually matter. But what I recognized then was that I hadn't grieved because the truth was I didn't know what it looked like or how to do it. And what I was able to do was actually spend really a whole day kind of in that grief process, and I howled. A sound came out of me while we were doing the plant medicine that I have never heard come out of my body ever. And it was, I can't describe it any more than a howling wail. It was so shocking to me that it was like, oh my God, I've made that sound. And just tears that were coming out of my face, and yet I didn't recognize initially that I was actually crying until I started proper sobbing, to the point where I, like a child who is overwrought, was doing the big sob, where it just comes out, and that was happening, and I recognized that that was me actually letting go of pent up grief that I didn't even know I'd been holding on to. And so my point of this is, we don't know what grief is like for us until we go through it. And it may well be that if you have done what I did and just carried on and kept busy and didn't really spend any time thinking about it or journaling on it or anything like that, which I didn't, it kind of makes sense that it is something that we need to allow ourselves some space and some time to go through, whatever that looks like for you. It may be that that meditation is something that can help you to release it. It may be that doing some kind of somatic work or kinesiology can help you release some of the tension and the pain and the stuff that you may be holding on to because of grief. It may be trauma therapy, or counselling will help you. There is bereavement counselling and grief counselling available, and it's something that I highly recommend you explore if you know, like me, that you really didn't take any space or time out to actually think about or process that person not being here anymore. And one of the things I do know, and it comes up a lot, is that often we turn to substances to help ourselves cope with the emotions that feel like you're on a roller coaster. And I shared this in the blog, and I'm not going to regurgitate the blog. But if you do find that if somebody has passed and it's fairly recent, when I'm saying fairly recent, in the last couple of years, and you are using or turning to substances to help you to cope, recognize it's probably a habit that you've created, and it's not you being an addict. I think it's really important to differentiate between the two. That coping mechanism, when we have emotions that are new, and they do literally come, almost in waves in those first couple of years, particularly, then recognize that, once you have realized that that's what they are related to, you can change things. And it's not as hard as you think. But it's really important as well that we don't allow ourselves to become a victim to the grief, because it's important that we continue with our lives. They are no longer here with us in their physical form, but we are still here. And there are people who we are important to. Even if you may feel insignificant, I can guarantee you that you are important to somebody or something. It might be an animal or a pet, or it may be something that you said in the past that has made somebody look up to you that you don't even know about. So recognizing that we need to grieve, and it's really, really important, but also recognizing that we must not allow it to completely take over our lives to the point where we don't actually allow ourselves to live our life, because chances are the person you are grieving did live their life. So if you are struggling, I highly recommend that you check out what is available locally to you in terms of bereavement or grief counselling and help. Talking about it is important. Look at death cafes. They are so, so helpful. And you get to meet other people who are going through the same thing as you. Just be aware that we don't want to hang on to it and utilize it as an excuse not to get on with our own lives. Will it crop up? Is there a time frame where, I know there's a phrase, well, you should be over it by now, but we're all different. And yes, time does, I believe, make it a little bit easier. It's not so powerfully at the forefront of your mind after time has passed. And I know that I look at things differently now. It's 5 years since my mum passed, which means it's going to be 7 years this year since my dad did. And I didn't grieve for him either, because, as I shared earlier, he kind of told me what he was going to do, and I knew that he wanted out. So he did commit suicide, and I got it. My relationship with my dad when he was alive was very odd. The last few years, it was very, very different. But while I was growing up, I was frightened of him. So my grieving for him was different completely to my grieving for my mum. But did I do it in the same ceremony when I was in Colombia? Yes, I did. And did it make a massive difference? Yes. But do I still have waves of emotion that I can only put down to grief? Yeah, I do, but it's okay, because I know that they are just that energy emotion. That's what emotions are. And they are signals that perhaps maybe I need to listen to. What is the thought process that comes along with that? Is there a message I'm needing to hear? Is there something that I'm needing to do to take care of myself that I've not been doing? It's usually a sign or it's a cue, and that's how I see it, to give myself a bit of space and a bit of time to process things and not rush, and thoroughly enjoy their memories and the things that you loved about them. So I hope what I've shared with you has been helpful. I've put some links in the show notes and in the description. If you're watching on YouTube, just go and check them out if you are struggling, or pass them on to somebody who you feel may be struggling. And I'd also like to, before I go, to invite you to subscribe to my channel, because I am trying to grow, particularly the podcast and the YouTube. I want to be doing more of sharing stuff face to face, because I want to be doing more face to face live events as well. So if you haven't subscribed, I would love you to. And if you have already subscribed, thank you so much. Keep watching, and I'll speak to you soon.